entrepreneurship, and this is where I really want to get your advice on.
hmm
Do you believe it's better to, because a lot of times some people just quit their job right out. I'm just going to quit and I'm going to do it. I don't know where the money's going to come. God's just going to give it to me, that type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it wise to say, hey, you know what, build yourself a financial plan before taking that leap, or see some type of financial stability coming from your business? Hey, Stephanie, welcome to the Girl Take No podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation. Listen, making smart money moves as new entrepreneurs is such an important thing. And I feel like this is the piece of it that we don't necessarily get deep into. We talk a lot around here about mindset and, you know, what it takes to be an entrepreneur. But when it comes to the money part,
Yeah.
on one, when you bring it in, what to do with it, how to make it work for you, I think those are like the big questions, you know, that
Yeah.
my audience needs to know more about. And some of them do ask questions around that. So I'm excited to have this conversation.
Well, thanks for having me. Yes, we want to make this a sustainable endeavor, right?
Listen, a profitable, sustainable business.
Yes.
Let's start from the beginning, Stephanie. So what inspired you to go from a global supply chain leader to founding your Women's Effect, Wealth Effect,
Yeah.
especially empowering career women financially? What inspired you to do it?
Yeah. I just turned 40 yesterday and I was reflecting on this and thinking about how, 5 years ago, I really thought I was going to turn 40 in my old career.
Yeah.
I remember coworkers and colleagues turning 40 and me thinking like, that's going to be me someday, right? With the kids and like juggling all the balls and all that good stuff. I was very fortunate to have a successful career right over the course of 15 years and was making very good money. And I think, in general, on the outside, everything looked like it was all working really well. And in a way it was. But I think when you have kids and you really start to take note of your time and how it's allocated and how you want to show up for them. And, my mom and dad worked like crazy. They still do, right? That's what I saw modeled for me. I thought I was going to work until I was 65 in a very like strong hustle way, right?
That's exactly how we feel.
Yeah. But I think in around 2019, 2020, my husband and I were very fortunate to make smart money moves right along the course of our journey. But we really started to get very serious about our money after a couples therapy conversation. And so, this is after my first son is born. It's after COVID. I'm in this big expat role in Singapore, right? And these expat roles are very transformational and they stretch you. And I was learning a lot, but the work just wasn't feeling the same anymore. And so we went to couples therapy more so to figure out what was going on with Stefanie. And one of the things that our therapist asked us to do was do some homework, go home and figure out like, if Stefanie left this job, what does life look like? What's the worst case scenario? Because that was my worst case scenario. There was no way in heck I was going to leave that job. And what that led us to really thinking about was our financial situation. And we had done a budget before and, we knew what we were spending, but we got into a very values-based, purposeful and intentional budget conversation, not just about what it was right then and there, but what we thought it would look like in the future. And because of my planning and forecasting experience, I'm always thinking about like, what do these numbers look like in the future? And so because of that conversation and getting our budget in check, and then we read a book together, Quit Like a Millionaire, my eyes to really the financial independence and what people will call FIRE movement was open. My eyes were open. To me, it's more financial independence and what is life like on your terms? You can say retire. I've retired a season of my life, right? As a 9-to-5 corporate career woman. But I felt like when I was making the decision to leave Dell, that I was looking around at other women that were working really hard, making good money, juggling all the things. And we were all suffering in silence. We weren't talking about money. We weren't talking about how we were going to utilize it as a tool. I think I think there's so much in the conversation for women about being successful and, delivering change for businesses and organizations and what we want to see right out in the world. But we're not all the time thinking about how it can serve us as a tool. So
Yeah.
fast forward to my decision to leave. I had built a personal finance plan for our family, right? I took out all my spreadsheets and I got really clear about, okay, well, if I stay here for this many years and invest this amount, that whole thing. And once I started to do that work, I was really looking at all the different scenarios of how I could leave maybe sooner. And because we had built such a nest egg, to the point where at least what I needed to contribute, right, to our personal family's finances from an immediate expense standpoint, we already had that covered in our investments. And so it gave me a lot of breathing room to think about what I wanted to do. And I wanted to help other women have that light bulb moment that I did.
Yeah.
Because it's not about retiring and sitting on the beach. That's great, right? Don't get me wrong. But ambitious and driven women aren't satisfied with that.
Mm-hmm.
Not for too long, right? I mean, we want that recharge and all that great stuff, but we want to contribute back to our communities. We want to be the change that we want to see, and we want to help other women along the way. And so, the Women's Wealth Effect was born because of that. And I tell people that while I could have started this business, like bringing my old hustle from work into it, I didn't want to do that. And I wanted to create this business more at a slower pace so that we could transition to Portugal and do all the things that we needed to do as a family to get adjusted and not feel so burdened by these self-imposed deadlines and goals that I could have put on the business. And so financial independence for me has allowed that. But I'm learning, right, about what it's like to be an entrepreneur and how I want to build the business and what type of revenue streams I want to have and foresee in this and how I want to serve my clients, which has been a journey all in itself.
Yeah. I feel like when it's with entrepreneurs, when we come out, we're not even thinking about the financial aspect of it. In terms of like revenue stream, we're just thinking about making money. Right? Like we're just thinking about making money. We're not thinking about how we're going to disperse that money. We're just thinking about, I need to make money. I need to make money. Right? So we just really focus on that. And a lot of times I tell people, when you take leaps into entrepreneurship, some leaps are intentional that can plan out, right? And see yourself being able to do it. My leap was unintentional. I got laid off. And I tell people, like, I felt like I wasn't prepared for it because I was in a place where financially, me and my husband didn't really take a look at our overall financial goals and what we needed to do. So when the layoff happened, I was like, oh my God, financially, we're not ready for this. I need to make money. Yeah. And so you're so focused on that, but being able, when it comes to entrepreneurship, and this is where I really want to get your advice on. Do you believe it's better because a lot of times some people just quit their job right out. I'm just going to quit and I'm going to do it. I don't know where the money's going to come. God's just going to give it to me, that type of thing. Yeah. Yeah. Is it wise to say, hey, you know what, build yourself a financial plan before taking that leap, or see some type of financial stability coming from your business before taking, for the ones who want to take an intentional leap like you did?
Yeah, absolutely. I use this order of operations in personal finance planning, but you can apply it 100% to building a business. Because at the end of the day, your personal finance planning is your own personal business at the end of it, right? Yeah. So the things that come to mind in my head are, do you have an emergency fund? Have you built up a cushion? Let's say you have a fully vetted plan. Great. Well, you still need a cushion, right? Because you don't know what bumps you're going to hit along the way. You don't know if the proof of concept that you set out to deliver is going to get thrown off the rails because of COVID, right? I know a lot of people who are going off to start their business during COVID, and that really changed the reality of what they could do, right? So you never know. Emergency fund in a personal sense is important, but emergency fund in a business sense is also important. As a business owner, I like to tell people, have a year's worth of expenses established, but it just depends on what lens you want to put on that. Is that all my expenses? Is it just my business expenses? What is it? Right. So there's that. I also think you have to know your numbers that you expect, right? In terms of what do I plan on roughly? And when I think about knowing your numbers, a lot of my clients start getting really bent out of shape around knowing them 100%.
Yeah.
The 80-20 rule is fine here, right? Like, what do you think you're going to spend in the first year? What are your prioritized things? What, based on those things you're going to spend, whether it's Facebook ads, lead generation, product costs, whatever, what do you expect to be generating in terms of revenue by when, right? It's a business plan. Do you know what that's going to look like? And what that does is it gives you, what do you believe reality should be? And from there, you can say, okay, happy path reality one is this. Let's just take a worst case scenario outside of that and go, if it doesn't work out, what is plan B? That's your best case scenario to work out, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully you've had, some time to work this maybe side hustle on the side and like prove out the concept and that type of thing. And if not, and you're in a situation, right, where you got to go make that money, you got to get really intentional about how you're going to do it, because the stress of not knowing, compounded with just the stress of being an entrepreneur, is a really tough spot to be in. And then you start making a lot of emotional decisions, right? It's just like emotional spending. And you're like throwing things at a wall to make something stick. And people like to say, knowledge is power. And I 100% believe in that. But I also think that a plan is power too. No more throwing our head into the sand and just hoping it's going to pan out, right?
Yeah.
Face your numbers, face the reality of what you believe needs to happen. And then you can go from there. And there's great, obviously people that you have interviewed and stuff on the podcast, there's great information around how should I look at my numbers as an entrepreneur? How do I read this? How, all of that stuff, that there's information available. Spend some time doing that. If you have the time before you take the leap. Obviously the other things are, what are you going to do about insurance? All those other things in terms of your expenses that you need to understand. But I like to really think through it from an emergency fund standpoint and at least the business plan, money going in, money going out.
I feel like this conversation, people are so afraid to talk about. Like people, I'm not afraid. I think people just in general get nervous. And when they think about what they have coming in versus what it takes to start a business, I think that's that little in between space is where a lot of people just kind of fall off, because they're like, I'm never going to be able to do this with the money that I have. But with the economy the way it is too, everything's been a lot more expensive. And I feel like it's that little ground in between where they fall off because they're so afraid to take that step, because they feel like I'm not going to be able to reach this number. Do you find that some of your clients, when it comes to that number, are afraid to maybe make a move because that number might seem unrealistic for them?
Really big. Yeah. I think we see that a lot. I mean, I even kind of felt that a bit when I thought about starting Women's Wealth Effect from the standpoint, I was like, I'm going to make $100,000 first year. I have not made $100,000 in my first year, first of all, right? Very transparently. Everything I've made in my business so far, I've reinvested back into the company. But we have, a very long runway of Stefanie doesn't need to make any money. My investments are making us money. So we're very fortunate in that regard, right? So that's the best case scenario. Go invest so that you have this financial freedom to do the passion work that you want to do. Best case scenario. But I think it's okay to break up the larger goal into smaller chunks, because then you can really celebrate along the way, right? And the reality is, and what I've learned is, you have to pivot a lot. You have to be very open to being okay pivoting. And that means that things change, right? In that overall planning process and what you expect and what happens. But the more that we can normalize talking about the numbers, the better. And I've actually seen a number of entrepreneurs coming back and going, this didn't work for me the way I wanted it to. I'm going back to work. And that's okay. That's absolutely really is. Okay, right? And people say that too about like the FIRE movement. Your worst case scenario is you go back to work. And no plan is permanent at the end of the day. And being okay with giving voice to that. And I think the other thing about entrepreneurship that I'll say about this one is, finding your tribe in this journey is really important because you can speak with other people that are experiencing the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I think like I said, because I took an unintentional leap, I didn't come out with okay, this is what I want to make. I'm now taking a step back to say, okay, Shaunie, how much is it that you want to make within this? Because I've been doing this podcast about a year now, and I was doing it as a side hustle because I was working. And so it's like now that you're doing it full time and you're doing all these other digital stuff, what is that goal now? Now I'm beginning to take a step back to give myself a number to work towards, to try to now build towards that. And it does seem scary, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to move towards it. If, that's all I can do is take the step. I don't want to be afraid to not take the step. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Yeah. So with Women's Effect, says that you aim to put more money into the hands of women. And from your perspective, tell me, how does financial empowerment affect women entrepreneurs differently? And why do you think it's crucial for their success?
As women, no matter what we say, our lives are impacted very differently, and I would say disproportionately by norms, right? We tend to be caregivers more. We certainly live longer. Just the cost of being a woman, whether it is managing your monthly costs from the standpoint of your reproductive cycle, having children, taking time off because you are having children, the gender pay gap is certainly real. All of these things are realities that we deal with. And if we don't acknowledge them for what they are, we're, again, head in the sand, hoping that somebody on this white chariot is going to come and save us.
Yeah.
And that's not going to happen, right?
Exactly.
It's just not. And so I think, as women entrepreneurs, from the standpoint of even investing, you have to look at this work and go, well, what is it for? The last thing I would say about this is your health is not guaranteed. Tomorrow, a year from now, something could happen that doesn't allow you to do the type of work that you want to do, the way you want to do it, the pace you want to do it, as flexible you want to do it, whatever. And so I think when you think about financial independence and women's wealth effect, when I think about getting more money in the hands of women, it's a couple different things. Number one, through career planning, right? I obviously saw a level of success in my career because I got very intentional about what I wanted. I voiced what I wanted. I sought mentorship. And I didn't just seek a mentor to bounce ideas off of. I was seeking mentors to create sponsors in rooms that I wasn't in yet. And that really helped, right? Because they knew what I wanted. They knew the type of work that I could bring to the table. And so when these opportunities were coming up, they were like, well, I know somebody, Stefanie, she can do this, right? So there's that element, demanding your worth, increasing your income along the way, because I don't sugarcoat the fact that as a 37-year-old millionaire, right? I didn't make that money by not increasing my income. We increased our income significantly along the way to accelerate our progress. But the other thing is as you make that hard-earned income, I like saying this in this way, it's taking your paycheck and creating a portfolio with it. Because the more that you can activate your money in an intentional and purposeful way, whether it be through investing in the stock market or thinking about how you might want to leverage real estate, right?
Yeah.
You give your money a job, and that money works for you even while you sleep. And it's what a lot of personal finance educators say, but it's true, right?
Yeah.
While you're sleeping in this global economy, and as the stock market and these other, companies all across the globe are doing whatever they're doing to try to improve their P&L and grow their business, you could get a piece of that pie too by investing in the stock market. And because of technology, it has made it so easy. And I say easy because it used to be very hard. It's a lot easier to invest. But I think with that, we have to be even more knowledgeable about what we're going to invest in. Because the reality is the financial industry and financial institutions weren't built with us being profitable in mind. They were built and created to make this whole body of work and investing seem scary and for very affluent people, and you needed to have a lot of money to get started and pay someone to help you along the way so that they can take fees from your investments and your growth over time. And so we are smart, capable individuals, whether we are in corporate or we're off building our own businesses, and with the right information to allow us to get started and with the right mindset to keep learning. Because as technology continues to advance, investing is going to change over time too. Fintech is a whole other beast that's going to continue to grow and morph and evolve. But it behooves us not only to go make the money, whether it be in our careers or in our businesses, but figure out how to go activate that paycheck and turn it into some level of portfolio that's working, where you don't have to be an active trading your time for money in that whole mix.
I like that. I like that, being able to take that check and have it in that play in the stock market. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of us, as when we're working, we're so scared to do, is take that little money, because like you said, the investing piece seems so unknown to us. And it seems like, I don't know stocks that well. I don't know what does well. I don't know if it grows up or down. How does that translate to more layman's terms? So we're so shy from doing it because we just don't understand it, you know? And so we won't put money over there because we feel like, I don't know, maybe it's that scarcity mindset where it's like,
that it could go away.
Yeah, right. Like I need every dollar I got, bills due. I got kids, especially if it's a single parent. It's really hard for them to,
100%.
I want to say it's hard for them to kind of take money and try to invest, you know? But I think the key word that you said is what's important here is intentionality.
Yes.
It's being able to be intentional and disciplined at it.
Yeah.
And think about a longer term versus short term.
Yes. Yes. And I think being able to take a step back and recognize that, you know, you see these charts, right, where it's like the total stock market just grows and grows and grows and grows, which is very true. And you can now invest in things that are the total stock market. So you don't have to go off and go, well, is Apple doing this? And is Microsoft doing this? And what about Johnson & Johnson? And Coca-Cola, I heard, was great. And oh, but now there's this new company called Rivian and they make electric vehicles. Like, should I? No. You have to take a step. You allow yourself to take a step back, invest in something that allows you to just take advantage of that whole body of work, and understand that the total US stock market delivers about an 8% rate of return historically since its inception. Sure, there are down years and that aren't that great, but it takes traditionally about a year to max 2 to 3 years for an economy to bounce back. And so, yeah, if you are going to take a step back and look at this from a long-term investing standpoint, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, and I still even tell people 10 to 15 years is a good chunk of time, right? Because I have women who are in their 50s, 55, and they're like, this is still an opportunity, right? Because if you are 55 and you're planning to have to still work till age 65, some people are telling me they're going to work till 70. Well, then you still have 10 to 15 years for your money to be working in the stock market. Go get that money going, right? And then maybe you can unlock some options to relax a little earlier or take a part-time job, right? And so, yeah, I think consistency, starting even with just a little bit so you can get your feet wet. It's all about like building that muscle, right? I think about it like cooking for me right now. I just wasn't a big cooker. And now there are things that I'm like, I cook this, this, and this, and this really quickly. I understand what I need. It's always in the pantry. And like I can whip up a meal in 30 minutes. And my husband looks at me like, who is this woman? I'm like, hey, you know, I put some time and effort into it. I got started. I got used to it. And I now have this muscle memory. Investing in a way is the same thing, because then you start to see things in the news. You start to triangulate, right, the conversation. Go into your social media and take off everybody that is selling you this get rich something scheme tomorrow, and go put just some sound investing education, financial literacy education in front of you so that you can start making it part of your day to day. You don't have to put like 15 people there. Just go get a couple people, put them in your ear, and start there.
Yeah. I like that. Just start small. Just take a step. You know, and this is for myself too. So I'm listening intensely because I'm like, she's right. I need to take a step. I need to take a step. It's for me as well. You know, you mentioned that in your career, of course, that you were able to move up, you voiced what you wanted and really move up in your career. Did you face any challenges being able to take those steps to move forward? Because I know a lot of women that listen to this podcast are career women who are still working and want to move up and be able to invest more either in their business or maybe get into investing. What advice could you give them or challenges that you faced and overcame when it comes to speaking, voicing what you want, especially being Latina, voicing what you want, right? Being a minority in the business. And going after that. And I really like what you said in terms of like seeking those mentors where they can kind of be a voice for you in certain rooms that you're not in. I really love how you phrased it. I don't know if I said exactly, but the way you phrased that. So let's talk more about that.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, one of the first challenges that kind of really popped up in my mind throughout my career was my age. So I got very serious about my career very early. And so, you know, when I started off in tech, I was 22, 23. I was managing a team by 24, 25. I had individuals who were like north of 40 and 50 that I was managing, and they're looking at this like mid-20s girl like, oh, excuse me.
Who is this?
Yeah. But I definitely brought this seriousness and this mindset of intention. And I was very honest with people about that. Like, if there was anyone that would let me get some time with them, whether it was a leader, a skip level leader, somebody that I got a reference to go talk to, I was setting up one-on-one conversations all the time. And that was a practice that I maintained throughout my entire career. And I met some really amazing people along the way. But you'll be surprised at how many people don't do that.
Yeah.
What we
I don't know a lot of
do,
people that do that.
Yeah, what we do is we sit back and we go, my manager's going to tell me what opportunity there is for me. And while they can bring you opportunities, their reach and their scope of influence is only so far. And a good manager will help you understand that, right? Because that's why they're leveraging other leaders to figure out where can Stefanie go next and what can she do next, et cetera, right? So I think being able to put yourself out there and have conversations to see what is out here for me. What was your career path, so-and-so, who I aspire to follow in your footsteps? Or, you know, what were the biggest kind of same question you just asked me, right? I would ask people that in one-on-ones, and they would give me their advice on what it was like growing their career. And I got that whole age thing at the very beginning from a couple of leaders as well. So I would say that's the first one. I think the second one was making the step from individual contributor to leader and figuring out how to still maintain the relationships that I had with my peers as individual contributors for a couple of reasons. Number one, they were potentially going to work on my team at some point. But also number two, just to not have that awkwardness, right? I'm now your leader, and, you know, and I think it takes a lot of self-awareness as a leader to, you know, take a step back and think about, well, how do I want to show up now in my leadership capacity versus the way I was in an individual contributor role and that type of thing. And then I think the third thing was starting to recognize that as you get into larger roles, you really have to, what got you to your current success is not going to help you moving forward as much. Things like delegation, things like, hey, treat your team and your business like its own business. Bring ideas to the table. Like, I now have the seat at the table, and I look back a little bit and I think, you know what? I didn't take advantage enough of putting my stamp on how I wanted things to be run. And I think part of it was I was seeking other people's approval, other leaders' approval, you know, other. And I didn't really realize this honestly until about a year after I left. And I was like, man, if I was running that team, I would do it so different now. But, you know, hindsight's 2020. When you're in it and you're like under-resourced and practically doing a director's job and an individual contributor, like, it was a lot at the time. And that's why I had people were really shocked when I left. Very shocked.
Because you were probably such a good level.
Yeah. And I think for me, I was like, if it wasn't COVID, it was going to be something else that was going to be like, shit hit the fan. And there was some issue that I had to go clean up with no resources. Right. And there was always going to be an excuse for why I didn't get what I needed to be successful or whatever. But then I think the writing on the wall was really just showing itself to me, because other women were telling me the same thing. They were like, I'm getting the same feedback. I'm not getting the same support, but other male counterparts were. And so I was like, this is just what I'm seeing. This is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm experiencing. I have this other option, and I'm going to take it. So that other women, when they're in my position that I was in then, have the financial backing and confidence that they can either speak truth to power, decide to stay and like fight the good fight, or make a decision to go make impact elsewhere. Right. And the interesting thing is, like, financial independence and having your money in order gives you a lot more confidence to do that.
Yes. Yeah. That surely does give you a lot more confidence when you can make that decision to either stay or go and it not affect you in a financial way when you're okay. And I think that's some of the things that we all try to build for ourselves, even as we're working our jobs, is to be able to get that financial stability. I mean, so do you think you experienced financial freedom once you left the job or while you was at the job?
I tell people that financial independence, and what they tell me financial independence is I can pay for my bills, right? Which is financial stability. I had a lot of financial stability through majority of my career. Yeah. But when I started understanding that I could now do something with the money and I was going to put it to work, I now had the emergency fund. I felt way more financially independent, probably towards my last 5 years at work, because I wasn't worried about, well, if I leave, like, I got to go find a job in three months, right? Like you get a 3-month severance sometimes whenever you might take a package or a voluntary severance type thing. And I was like, I don't have to worry about that. That's a great feeling. But I will say that whenever we became debt free, that was another level of financial independence, because I was now able to put all of my money towards our financial goals and our financial future. So that was another level. And of course, getting to the point where you start to see that, hey, your investments can pay you a good $4,000 or $5,000, $6,000 a month if you need that. It becomes it puts you in a very different mindset. So I think it was a phase of feeling more financially independent. But once I put the plan together, the plan was a game changer, because it was like, oh, she shouldn't have pulled out her spreadsheet. But I teach personal finance and investing that way. And every woman that comes through my Women's Wealth Investing Effect program, they walk away with a financial plan like that. Because what I tell them is, I want you to be able to walk away from this program, of course, having a path to investing your money and what you're going to do with it and feeling confident about that. But if you work with a financial advisor, I want you to be able to be confident enough to hold them accountable. And number 2, as your life happens, you have kids, you sell a house, there's a death in the family, whatever, and it throws a wrench in your financial plan, you can go back to it, rework the numbers, and feel confident that you're like, okay, this is what it means, versus like, the sky is falling and I have no money. Right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of power in grounding yourself in what your financial reality is, so that you can do something about it.
Yeah. And I think that's that reality a lot of us don't want to face.
Yeah. It is scary, but necessary.
Yeah. So you've openly shared that your journey of paying off $420,000 in debt. And for entrepreneurs dealing with business or personal debt, what strategies could you recommend for them for managing and maybe trying to alleviate this financial burden for them?
Yeah. The first thing is categorizing all of it, understanding what it is, why it is what it is, right? So that you not only understand the outcome, but like, what were the symptoms that happened over here that created this outcome? Sometimes it's like all of the worst case scenarios happen and somebody goes into debt, right? And they're not feeding into that debt anymore. They're just trying to figure out how to chip away at it, right? In some cases, individuals have debt and they continue to feed into it. And it's just this cycle. So I think being able to have an open and honest conversation with yourself about, hey, what is it? Why did it happen? Can I do some journaling or whatever? That's the first thing. The second thing is, and you need to make a decision, right? By understanding your numbers and figuring out, okay, where do you have this extra, whether it's revenue from your business, whatever, how are you going to allocate that extra to start paying that debt down, right?
Yeah.
You have two options. You have the debt avalanche or the debt snowball method. One method is you take everything and you categorize it by the interest rate, right? And you start paying off the highest interest debt first, because that's the one that's costing you the most, right? Because the higher that interest rate, the more money that you're paying an institution. And that tends to be the less like motivating path, but it's the most financially impactful path, right? So if you're all about like getting serious and like, I'm going to go tackle it, that's the best method for you. But if you are more about, hey, I need to see some quick wins and like mentally and mindset wise, I need to see some happy path here, then you may go with the lowest balance, right? And then work your way down your debts. And anything that you can allocate towards extra payments, not just monthly payments, the better, right? And then whenever you have things like a big deal come through or a sponsorship or something, right? These windfalls, you start really pushing towards that debt to just eliminate it. And the best way to keep that from happening again, right, is that emergency fund, right? And so, making sure that you have that fund so that you don't have to rely on the debt is really helpful.
Yeah. I think with the emergency fund, it takes such discipline when it comes to saving, period. Because my mom was a true saver, always been that way. She's like, if you have $1, put 50 cents away. She's that kind of parent. And she really instilled that in us. But I know over the years for me, and I'm being full transparent here, it's been very difficult for me to save. It really has, which is why I said when I got laid off from my job, I wasn't prepared. And that's the main thing I felt like that hurt me the most. It was like, I'm not even prepared for this. And I know most people say, oh, you're not prepared. No one is prepared for a layoff or to get fired from a job. And I'm like, I know, but still, I feel like I should have been saving. I should have had more money. I should have been like not afraid for this, but more confident. So, okay, I'm gonna be okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's so hard to do. So what advice or what maybe steps that a person can take, like starting today, to try to be more intentional when it comes to saving that emergency fund? Because people talk about it all the time, but I swear to you, I feel like it's such a hard thing to do.
Yeah. One of the things that I learned from very early on was my 401k. And I say that because it was one of those things that like you never saw the money in your paycheck. It was taken out before it ever came into your checking account. So when it came to saving, doing like a money map and understanding, okay, I get paid here, it comes into this account. If you have savings goals, you create a separate account, hopefully a high yield savings account, right? Because you're going to get more interest on that money than a traditional savings account with a brick and mortar bank. I like to tell people about Ally. It's an online bank. They've got great interest rates. So go check them out. But when you get paid, you go work with your employer to have that money distributed to those accounts. So it's almost like you're investing in a 401k. You never even saw that money hit your paycheck. And what does that do? It forces you to have a reckoning with two things. You pay yourself first because your money's going into your emergency fund first before it ever comes into your checking account. And number two, now you only have to spend what went to your checking account. You cannot spend any more than that, right?
Yeah.
And so the paying off the $420,000 worth of debt happened because we had $500,000 in a savings account, which was a huge no-no. It wasn't in a high yield savings account. I was the saver. I had to save all this money but I never saw it, right? I just put it in the savings account and it went away. And so Joe and I were initially putting $1,000 in that account when we first got married because we funded our wedding. And I was like, never, ever will I ever take credit card debt out again. I never wanted to do that again. So we were saving just this money. And then eventually we got to $4,000 a month because we had increased our income. But mind you, we weren't seeing that money in our paychecks. It was just going straight into the savings account. Then anytime we had bonuses come our way. Joseph would sell real estate. We were just throwing money into this savings account. I do not advise to throw $500,000 in a savings account, but my point is we never saw it.
Yeah.
So what we would spend in terms of if we bought a house, like how much mortgage did we get qualified for, just our general living expenses, that type of thing, we were able to maintain our expenses, and we weren't depriving ourselves, but we weren't spending everything as we were making more money, which psychologically really helps when you do your money map and you make the money go to the places it needs to go to before coming into your paycheck.
Yes. I like that. Just being able to put it over there automatically. And I think what works, because, you know, we all have savings, we all have our bank accounts, we have a savings there too. But I think being able to have that high yield saving account that's not attached to your bank account.
Yes.
Because I feel like if the money is easy to access, then we're going to use it. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
But if it goes somewhere else where I can't get, it's not easily accessible to me, then I don't even think about it. It's just there.
One extra step feels like a mountain of work for you to have to do to go access something.
Exactly.
And it's like freezing your credit cards in an icebox or something. Like you just don't,
you don't want to do it.
Unless you really have to, which is typically an emergency. Yes.
Exactly. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you, how did you and your husband get to that financial $420,000 in debt free? And then, you know what I mean? Because I was like, that's a lot. It's like, why don't one, that takes real discipline to be able to pay off that kind of debt.
Yeah. You know, a couple things. There was the whole, like, we got married, we paid about $20,000 for our wedding. And I was like, never again will we be in a position where we have to make a large expense, fund a large expense, but have to put it on a credit card. So I was like, bound and determined. So of course, everything I was told when I was little, save, save, save. So we were saving the money. When we paid off the debt, though, that's when we started having the real conversations about financial freedom. What is the order? Emergency fund? Check. Too much emergency fund. What do we do with the emergency fund, right? So we were going, okay, well, we have these debts. Joe had 40,000. I had 20,000 worth of student loans. We paid them off. We just were like, and I remember having the conversation with him. I was like, well, the interest rate's really low. He was like, can we just pay this off, please? So we paid him off. And then we had our house back in Texas. We had full intentions of moving back to Texas initially. And so we paid off that house. We were like, we're going to pay it off. It's our rental. It's our primary. We're going to go back to it. And then we didn't go back to it. So what ended up happening with that was we were now renting the house, and what we were paying towards the mortgage was going into our investments. And then what they were paying us to rent the house was going towards our investments. So we just saw this turbocharge of being able to invest more money by just eliminating the debt. And so, that $500,000, 360-ish went towards the house at that point, because we'd already paid off our student loans. And then the rest of it went to starting like our real, outside of our retirement accounts, investing journey.
Yeah. How do because you said you didn't want to do anything else on credit. So how do your thoughts? Because I see a lot of people online pushing, oh, you can get business credit, you can get business loans, you can get business credit here, business credit there. What is your take on that? What is your advice on, as an entrepreneur, maybe going to get business credit? Because I always tell people too, and I don't really like credit cards much, because I believe credit cards are only built to keep you in debt.
Yeah.
What is your mindset around that?
I think a couple things. When you know, like when you have the financial plan, when you have your business plan, when you're disciplined, using leverage, which is really what the rich people say it is, right? When you use leverage, they use it to their advantage. At the same time, if you're taking out debt and you're like hope and a prayer taking it out, that's where I have a lot more anxiety around taking out debt. Me personally, and even for Joseph, and my husband's been an entrepreneur for almost a decade now, he hasn't taken out any business credit, and I haven't either. A lot of that comes from the fact that we recognize the power of online. We recognize the power of proof of concept. And so we're taking kind of those validation, steps in our businesses before going all out on something, right? And so I think it depends on if you're like creating a product, that's different, right? If you're creating a product and you have to go and buy material and all that stuff, that's a totally different bear. But if it's not necessary, like, do you need to hire the VA right now? Do you need to have the Cush website right now? What do you need first? And surely there's a path where you don't have to take out a ton. Now, there's also grants, right? There's lots of grants out there.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a lot of other options first before having to go all the way into business credit.
Yeah. I like that. I like that you said grants, because we know there's grants out there. I think people don't want to take the time to do the due diligence of finding the grant, writing the grant, finding a grant writer that can help you with the grant. I think that's what discourage people from doing it. And then you see all these people online, oh, you can get business credit so easily. You know, it's that quick thing. You know what I mean? And so many people gravitate towards that.
Buy this car, write it off as a tax, and like, hold on a second. Can we make some money in our business first?
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
What advice would you give a new entrepreneur who is taking a leap intentionally, have some money saved, but what advice would you give them to help them to continue to build on what they already have?
In what way build on what they already have?
You know, meaning like they already have some money saved, but yet they're investing in their product. Let's say it's an online business, but they want to see the money that they have saved grow for them. What type of strategies should they implement to see the money that they have grow for them, or maybe the money that they bring in? Do you advise entrepreneurs to say, hey, the money you're bringing in from your product sales, you know, take that money, put it here, but also invest in other places? Do you advise on that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. Looking at your business in general from that plan perspective first is going to give you a sense of how much do I need to reinvest if there's at any point where I'm reinvesting back into my business, right?
Yeah.
And, for some people, they're like, I know I'm going to reinvest over the first 1 to 2 years because they've got very specific like scale goals, and they know what their scale goals are going to be and like all of that good stuff. I want to run my business very lean. I don't want to manage people. I don't want, I'm really trying to figure out how to run this lean.
Yeah.
That being said, if you have an answer to what your reinvestment needs are into your business, everything else, where possible, obviously your expenses that you need to pay yourself, but everything else should go into some level of an investment plan. And leveraging something like a solo 401k is a great, great vehicle for business owners, especially if you're a solo entrepreneur. Why?
Yeah.
Because you can invest upwards to like $68,000 this year, right? As a solo entrepreneur with a solo 401k. And all of that is it's a tax deduction, right? So you can, let's say you pay yourself as an entrepreneur $100,000. You invest 50,000 of it into a solo 401k, which is almost double the amount that a normal W-2 employee can invest into a 401k today, right? $23,000 is the max. But if you invest $50,000 out of your 100 that you made, you're only paying taxes on 50K. That's huge.
Yeah.
Right? And so as business owners, understanding a bit of the tax code in that regard, there are some really cool benefits from that standpoint outside of LLC and everything like that, right? But the solo 401k is a really powerful way of being able to turbocharge, let's say, your retirement plan, your traditional retirement plan. But having a plan like I work with my clients on is, well, how much of your money do you need to ultimately invest in your retirement plan? At some point, maybe you need to start investing outside of your retirement plan, maybe a taxable brokerage, et cetera, because you may want to access that money before the age of 60 or 59 and a half, right? So getting a little intentional is important. But when you do make the decision to invest in maybe a solo 401k or something, set a foundation first. Choose something like S&P 500 or total US stock market first, or go even more passive and choose something like a target date fund. And what that is it will set up your account where you're investing in stocks and bonds, and it'll adjust that allocation for you up until your age of retirement so you don't ever have to worry about it. Vanguard has great options for that. Fidelity has great options for that. You essentially just go look at the target date fund. You look at your age and when you're expected to retire, and you choose the right date fund for yourself. And they're pretty transparent about what they're investing in stocks and bonds. And most people that I speak to that try the DIY route first
Mm-hmm.
They wish they would have gone the target date fund route first, because it just takes their hands off of the allocation piece.
Yeah, that's good advice. Definitely. I like that. And I noticed that a lot of entrepreneurs don't really pay themselves first. I have a few friends that have businesses, and I think they're doing pretty well, but they're still like everything goes back into the business. They don't pay themselves. And so I didn't know if that was the right thing to do. Or, you know what I mean? Or maybe they have something else set up where they feel like, oh, okay, I don't have to have the business pay me yet. I'm okay. But do you think it's better to say, hey, put like you said, pay yourself first, put something towards for you when you're an entrepreneur or starting out? Or do you say, hey, look back and look at your business and kind of see what it needs and then determine it from there?
You know, if your business is ultimately funding your expenses, right, then you have to keep the business afloat. And I'm sure that's a reckoning that people have to think through. And it's interestingly enough, like my husband's had to deal with that a lot, and he's invested quite a bit into his business over time. But because he's very intentional about what that investment is, it is 10x what his investment into his business has been. And so I would ask, those individuals that have had their businesses for a while and they're doing okay and they're still not paying themselves. I just ask them the question, like, why aren't they paying themselves? And if they really believe that the reinvestment is scaling their business, right? They're 2xing, 3xing that revenue.
Yeah.
But if not, then you have to ask yourself the question, like, is the business efficient? Right? And where is the scale part? Because at some point you got to scale the revenue to ultimately pay yourself, right? Or where's the money coming from for you to live off of?
Yeah, that's true. Well, this has been a really good conversation. It probably went longer than expected, but I'm glad it did, because I learned so much and I have so many questions. But looking ahead, what do you see for your business? Like, what are you most excited about that's going to happen with your business?
Yeah, when you're navigating into a space like helping women with their money, you want to help everybody, right?
Yeah.
And that's really challenging as a business owner. But I'm very passionate about helping that woman who is trying to make strides in her career, but needs to make sense of her financial life so that she can regain her confidence, be able to walk into work as her whole ass self and all of that good stuff. And so I'll very, very much be focused on professional, career, ambitious women in my practice. But my husband and I are very passionate about this whole body of work and working together. And so this year we have a strong YouTube focus. And so we have our Permission to Be Wealthy channel. And so we're very committed to that this year. And that's for me in my head, that was my way of saying, you know what? I want to touch more people.
Yeah.
But I know that in the way that I can individually serve individuals, my time only goes so far, right? And so YouTube for me is allowing me to do that. Women's Wealth Effect and the Women's Wealth Investing Effect program and my one-on-one coaching, right, will remain as is. And I've started speaking. Yeah. So I'm going back to the US actually this month to do my first speaking event. And I'm very excited.
That's cool.
A whole room full of women. So yeah.
I know. Listen, you have a wealth of knowledge. So they're definitely going to learn a lot from you. And I appreciate you being on the podcast. I learned a lot. I appreciate you so much for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right, guys. Listen, I am Shaunie Sanders. This is the Girl Taking the Podcast, and we will talk to you next time.